Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back on into the Space Cowboy Show. I'm your host, Ricardo, and we have a lot to talk about for this particular week of Cowboys football. We had to play the Chargers, but it didn't mean anything for us because we were mathematically eliminated from the playoffs before a snap was played, thanks to the Philadelphia Eagles. You went from 6-5-1 to 6-8-1 out of the last 3 weeks, and now you are going to be on the couch once again. And not only are you going to be on the couch, we will go 30 years without making the NFC Championship game. Hooray, guys, we did it. But all that out of the way, before we get into today's video and talk about how we got here, if you do me a favor, please make sure to like the video, subscribe if you're new, and hit that notification bell. By the way, show is powered by Crushman Media. I would hope you go check out the other Crushman Media Network shows that are here, and I greatly appreciate every single one of you, and I hope you guys have a fantastic holiday before we begin. Now, the biggest question that I have to ask is, why did the 2025 Dallas Cowboys miss the playoffs? I'm pretty sure many of you already know the reasons why, but in terms of having an actual discussion, and I want to hear several different viewpoints on this, I'll go ahead and start. The number one thing, your defense. Your defense was so bad, this was the 8th time in the 15 games that you've played that you've given up 30 points or more. That is insane. The fact that you have a defense that has done that so many times, and even with adding personnel to your squad, getting guys back from injury, all that stuff, and you still can't get it done, this is just insane to me. And not only was that part of the reason why you didn't make the playoffs, you also have to look to the other sides of the ball. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, was it the primary culprit as to why you didn't make the playoffs? No, but it was part of the reason as to why. And you might be asking, well, why are you even saying that? They were the number 1 ranked offense in the NFL. Well, when you really sit down and think about it, when you go and watch these games and you look back at the film as to how we got to this point, offensively, yes, the Cowboys were very damn good this season, but in many instances, you had situations where it felt like your offense stalled when you really needed it to stay alive, or you were doing things in terms of, oh, we're going to go for it, but we're going to fake that we're going for it, and you end up burning a timeout, or you go for it when you really don't need to, and you miss out on points, and it's just a lot of that indecisiveness really showcased as we went throughout the season. Now, it is very annoying, to say the least, that the fact that we had the number 1 offense and the best we had to show for it was a year where we are currently 6-8-1, and a lot of the times we had to play at a perfect level offensively just to have a chance in a game. You're not going to win or do anything successful whatsoever that year. But I do think that when we look at the past 3 weeks especially, your offense could not travel on the road to save your life. Now, the other thing about that is we saw instances where I felt like it was McCarthy-esque, where there were guys that were not getting the ball that were helping you facilitate offense earlier in the year when there was film to show that. And I get it. Not every game is going to be a perfect offensive showing. However, it is important that you have to realize that, you have these dudes that make plays. You need to give them the ball. You have 2 guys that had 1,000 yards receiving this year. That's great. You had a 1,000-yard rusher. That's awesome. You have a top passer and a top quarterback. Cool. But you had nothing to show for it because, again, these stats are cool and stuff like that. I'm not trying to say that all these dudes are bad. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that situationally, especially over the past couple of weeks in this 3-game losing skid, your offense would just show up in spurts and then just go kaput. And that's not a recipe for success. Finally, your special teams didn't do you any favors whatsoever this season. Yes, you have Brandon Aubrey, who had a couple misses this year, and he was very helpful for you winning games or even tying games up with ridiculous kicks and stuff like that. But when you really think about it, what has this Cowboys special teams unit done that was impactful for you? With field positioning? Kevontae Turpin didn't help you whatsoever this year, and then you had so many penalties where it pinned you back that it even hurt you offensively, and your special teams unit didn't do a whole lot to set you up on the offensive side of the ball as well. It was a complete dysfunction when we talk about how the team was operating as a cohesive unit. Other parts of it too come down to the front office and how things operated throughout the season and even before that. You trading away Micah Parsons definitely changed the whole vibe of how we looked at this particular season. And even if Micah Parsons was still here, I don't think that things fundamentally change for you. But a lot of the moves that you made were setting you up for next year. So now the pressure is on in 2026 for you to put many of these pieces of the puzzle together to make this thing work. But even if the Cowboys did make the playoffs in 2025, they weren't going to do much this year because of the flaws that I had mentioned previously. And I think that what is so irritating about this is that there was no semblance of consistency throughout the season. And that's what scares me going into year 2 of the Brian Schottenheimer era, is that I said before this year began, I needed to see consistency in all 3 phases of our football team. And I understand it is just 1 year, and that's a hard sample size to really look at things. And the reason I'm being a lot more harsh on Brian Schottenheimer as we're getting closer and closer to 2026 and then us shifting the full focus to that particular season is that I am trying to set up my expectations for 2026 and what I need to see from this football team to say to myself at least, okay, they are making moves in the right direction and I can say that I'm satisfied with where we're at as a football team. And the reason I bring up 2026 is the things that happened in this Chargers game were a microcosm of why this season was a failure for the Dallas Cowboys. Your defense couldn't stop any big plays or anything whatsoever, and some of the personnel that you brought in weren't really helping you whatsoever. And I'm talking about guys like Kenneth Murray, for example, that just looked like he's just a body out there, just there to be someone in a number. Then you have to look at the offensive side of the ball. You score 17 points in that first half. Looks like the offense is clicking, especially in the passing game. And then it goes completely silent in the second half. Again, another thing that we've seen throughout this season. And then your special teams unit consistently effing you over and not giving you any help whatsoever. And again, not talking about Brandon Aubrey. I'm talking about Cavante Turpin and the guys over there that are supposed to help set up good field position or stop the opposing team in their return game, right? This Chargers game was everything as to why the Cowboys have failed in 2025. Now, if the season were to end today, the Cowboys would hold the 13th overall selection and the 21st overall selection in the 2026 NFL draft for the first round. And it's very, very key that the Cowboys hit on those selections. Now, given with where you're at as a team, offensively, you pretty much have the personnel you need to be successful. I understand we've talked about things like your offensive line and certain guys, Terrence Steele, that you might have to replace. And then you look at your playmakers. You got George Pickens here this year, and you're going to need to pay him. You have guys like Javonte Williams you're going to have to consider possibly re-signing. There's going to be a lot of moving parts for this particular offseason, and it's going to be huge in setting up how the rest of this is going to play out. Because if the Cowboys go into this offseason and penny pinch like they've done before, and they say, okay, offensively, we paid George Pickens. Let's just say they re-signed Javonte Williams to a nice little contract, but defensively, they do nothing else. That's going to be a problem because now you're banking on these draft picks to do something for you, but Will McClay hasn't really been hitting on these draft picks on the defensive side of the ball like you've been needing to. Aside from Micah Parsons, guys, when's the last time the Cowboys really hit on a first-round draft pick on the defensive side of the ball? And before you say, oh, that's not being fair, Space, because you got to really think about it. You know, we take a lot of draft picks on the offensive side of the ball in the first round. Okay, fine. That's fine. But at the same time, that doesn't negate the deficiencies that Will McClay has had as a scout for you. And it's considering the fact this is the same dude that pushed for Mozzie Smith not too long ago. I get it. It is a one-time thing. But we have to really understand with how the Cowboys operate, they can't afford to miss in the draft. Because when you don't spend money in free agency to add players to fill the holes that you're making, you're not doing yourself any favors, and you're just right back to square one. I remember when Stephen Jones talked about how, oh, well, you can't win a Super Bowl in the offseason in April and March and all this other stuff. Yeah, but you can for sure lose one. If you don't make the correct moves, it can definitely put you behind the 8 ball and force you to play catch up. And now you're hoping that these young guys can step in and supplement what you've lost. That's not a healthy way to build your team. I'm not going to sit here and act like every move they made is terrible. Them going and getting Quinnen Williams was the right move. Them going and getting George Pickens was the right move. But you can't sit on your laurels and say that that's everything we can do and that's all in. That's not what you do. You build off of that. And this is where I'm going to have to look at Brian Schottenheimer, and I'm going to pray to God that this guy continues to push the envelope to add more playmakers to this team. One thing that worried me, and I said this before, is that Mike McCarthy got complacent with the roster he had and he didn't push to get more players. I'm not saying he didn't do anything at all, but if you are not making it a priority to be like, yo, I need to get this guy, or we need to get this guy that you're having talks with because he's going to help our football team out, that goes a long way. And I'm very curious to see how this second year of the Brian Schottenheimer era goes for the Cowboys. Because now, as we really think about it, okay, can they continue to make these types of moves to continue to construct their team? Again, I'm not going to get mad that you trade a day 3 pick for a guy that's mediocre. However, what's going to make me more annoyed is if you just make the one trade and you don't build on top of that. Like when they went out and got Kaiir Elam and they went and got Kenneth Murray, I have no problem with you getting those guys. I'm a very big believer on pushing the depth down the depth chart. What I mean by that is that a guy like Kenneth Murray should not be a starter. He should be a backup for you at best. And so to remedy that, what you need to do is you need to go acquire another player. And no, that doesn't mean you do that during the season. I'm talking about during the off season. So you make sure that, hey, God forbid something happens, I at least know that I did something here to help me prevent, like if there's an injury or maybe the guy isn't as good as I think he is. That is exactly why you go and acquire as many players as possible. That doesn't mean you just sign anybody. That's not what I'm trying to say here. What I'm trying to say here, and this is what the Cowboys need to start doing more and more and more, as I've said for the many times that I've been covering the Cowboys, they need to make quality free agent acquisitions. You going to the clearance bin every single offseason and hitting on one or two guys is not success. Yes, it's awesome when you get something like that. Many teams go through it. But if you're relying on that, you're just setting yourself up for failure. In fact, the Cowboys need to change their philosophy with how they've handled roster construction. We've seen several times over the past, I would say, 13 years now, the Cowboys have been penny pinchers. They refuse to spend any money in outside free agent acquisitions. Now, you might say, Space, with all due respect, the Cowboys get a lot of talented players in the draft, so they got to pay them. That's fine. But you can't sit there and then complain, not saying you, I'm talking about the Joneses, when they have to, pay a guy, right? Because it's on you to pay these guys early to make sure their cap hits aren't that bad. And the reason why you pay them early is if things fall out, guess what? You can get out of the contract earlier and quickly. That is exactly why I want these guys to be proactive, not reactive. And that is why I get very, very frustrated when it comes to how the Cowboys have handled things over the past several decades now. Now, I understand the season isn't over. We got 2 more games. We got the Commanders and the Giants. But the season's over in the sense that you're not going to be able to do anything meaningful for the rest of the year. So the question now becomes, do you sit guys? Do you tank? All this other stuff. Now, you're going to have people that say, no, the Cowboys shouldn't tank. That's stupid. You need to play for pride. I'm going to be straight up honest with you. The minute you get eliminated from the playoffs, all you're doing is putting your guys at risk to getting hurt. Now, I understand why you play your guys, the guys that have been starting throughout the whole year, because there are incentivized contracts. If you make a certain amount of starts, you make a certain amount of money, X, Y, Z. I completely understand that. However, if we really, really, really think about it from a team building perspective, it doesn't put you in a better position whatsoever. God forbid a meaningful player on your football team gets hurt and it affects it for 2026. That's why I'm okay with shutting down Dak Prescott for the remainder of the year. If he wants to play, all right, that's not my decision, but for me, you just shut him down. See what Joe Milton can do. See what a lot of these other young guys can do. Give them a chance because we need to see what we have on this roster. Now, you may disagree with me, and I'm okay with that. You know, if you want to see these guys play because they haven't earned the right to sit, I completely understand. I'm not going to try and sway you from that position whatsoever. I'm just trying to look at it for the simplicity of you need to get the highest draft pick possible. And what good is it ending the season 8-1 when you can finish 6-10-1 and you get a better draft pick? And maybe it turns into a really good player. And again, maybe. You don't know who they're going to draft. We don't know who's going to be on the board and a lot of other things. We'll talk about that in the offseason. But to me, I think when you are mathematically eliminated from the playoffs or you have the number one seed, you should be resting your guys and not subject them to further injury and things of that nature. Now, as we reach the end of 2025, I want to say that I hope everyone has a happy holiday and a happy new year, and I hope that everyone's families are safe, healthy, and have a fantastic holiday. That's the first thing I want to get off. The second thing in terms of content creation as to where we're at right now, I'm simply going to be taking a minor break until the Cowboys season is officially over. Once we get to the last quarter of football and the season hits all zeros, then we're going to start the off-season content. So if you don't see me for the next couple of weeks, I haven't ghosted anybody. I'm just enjoying the rest of 2025 and just trying to take in as much information as I can. We'll review the entire 2025 season and we'll go from there. So I love every single one of you. I appreciate all the support you guys have given me. I can't wait to see what we do in 2026, and I hope to see you guys there. Have a good one, guys, and I'll see you later.